I think it's incredibly important that we read bills before we vote on them, that we have adequate debate, and that we really understand what we're doing. The Magnitsky Act was originally an act that sought to sanction people in Russia, still does, but was expanded beyond Russia. And now this bill would expand it further. When you're going to sanction people, there has to be an argument about who you're going to sanction. So the original Magnitsky Act has in law that you would sanction people who have gross violations of internationally recognized human rights. Well, that sounds good, but the Magnitsky Act goes a step further and defines what these are. Gross violations of human rights includes torture, cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment, punishment, prolonged detention without charges and trial, causing the disappearance of persons by the abduction and clandestine detention of those persons. A lot of this applies to really what happened to Magnitsky. This was named after him because of what happened to him. Other flagrant denials of the right to life, liberty, and the security of the person. What we're having happen right now is they're trying to pull a fast one, basically. We're going to get rid of all definitions of gross human rights, and we're going to replace it with not a list of things like torture and murder, indefinite detention. We're going to replace it with the words serious human rights abuse. Well, it still sounds pretty good, but it's like, what does that mean? The problem is that many different people have different definitions of rights. The left, including the UN, believes that you have a right to an abortion, to a house, to the internet, to health care. So you can see how if you have wide open, vague, vastly ambiguous language, that someone could be president and say, the leader of that country is denying the human right to abortion. So therefore, we must sanction them without any sort of tribunal, without any sort of due process. They would just simply sanction them. Or what if they're not providing the internet? So the thing is, words are important. You can't have vacuous sort of definitions. Where did this definition? It came from the Trump administration. So basically what they're trying to do is mirror the Trump administration, which gave unlimited authority to the president. It's kind of surprising for all the superficial rhetoric and of opposition to President Trump that they're trying to adopt his language now. But his language also comes from the Biden administration, because the one thing presidents have in common is they like unlimited power without checks and balances. If this language goes through, it'll remove any checks and balances or any definitions as to what human rights abuses are. It's a terrible mistake. It's rash, and we shouldn't do it. I've offered an amendment, and I'll offer it here in a moment. My amendment simply includes the definition that I just read. Gross violation of human rights, torture, cruel and inhumane treatment, indefinite detention. That's what we would put in the bill, is the actual definition. These aren't my words. These are the words of the mostly Democrats who wrote the bill, the Magnitsky Act. What they're trying to do is take the Magnitsky Act and drive an enormous hole in it that you can push anything through and do sanctions on anybody, anywhere in the world, based on a vague, ambiguous, and vast definition that is not specific. All I'm asking is that you keep the Magnitsky Act. The irony here is the very authors of the Magnitsky Act are on the floor saying, we don't want the Magnitsky Act anymore. We want a big, enormous hole that the president can sanction anybody in the world anytime. It's a terrible idea. It's rife for abuse from a president. Many on the other side had arguments with the previous president, and they worried about him having unlimited power. So they want to give unlimited power to their president because they like him better. Well, guess what? I'm an equal opportunity, ecumenical kind of guy that says, no president should have vast power. All presidents' powers should be circumspect. All presidents' powers should be controlled. And all I'm asking for is we pass the original Magnitsky Act. So this is going to be forever. This isn't a year or two. We first started into the Magnitsky Act. We were going to do it just a year or two and see how it's going. This is forever. It'll never come back up again. And we're doing it with 5 minutes worth of debate, not going through a committee. And we're just simply going to say, do whatever you want, sanction anybody in the entire world. It's a huge mistake. It's a huge expansion of government power or presidential power, and it'll lead to abuse. And I promise you, the moment there's a Republican president back in the White House, the other side will be squawking, saying, why is he doing this? Why is he doing this? So I'd say take a step back. We could talk about this over the next several days. We could come to an agreement. I've even said we could expand the definition. The definition of gross violation of human rights from Magnitsky should not be thrown away, and we could add to it. If there are other things such as corruption you don't think are included, give us some words, we'll talk about it and see if we can come to a compromise. That's what was offered, and back what we get is that, oh, everybody else agrees on the other side, so I should be quiet. I'm talking about something that's arcane. This is your language. This is the Magnitsky Act from the last 5 years, and you're calling it arcane? This is a very reasonable request, and it's a very unreasonable request to ram this down the throats of Americans, to expand presidential power with no checks and balances, and I absolutely object to it. I will offer as a counter, though, a unanimous consent request that is at the desk to have my amendment pass immediately, and if my amendment is passed immediately, that the remaining request from the Senator Schumer be passed as well.
Mr. President.
The majority leader is recognized.
Before I yield to my friend from the state of Maryland, the author of the Magnitsky Act, let me just say this to my good friend from Kentucky. Every senator would like their amendment to be easily inserted into a bill. But in the Senate, we vote. I am offering the senator a vote on his amendment. If each senator said my way or the highway, we'd have total paralysis, even on an important piece of legislation like this. I yield to the senator from Maryland.
Mr. President.